Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will start today's event with an introduction by the BC Liberal candidate for Port Moody Coquitlam, James Robertson, and then we will go to BC Liberal Leader Andrew Wilkinson. We'll then go to questions. We have time today for one question and one follow-up from each reporter. Thanks, James. You can go ahead.
I'll take off my mask here. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm James Robertson, and I'm honored to be the BC Liberal candidate for Port Moody and Coquitlam. Before we get started, I'm pretty excited here that I have the Tri-City team with three other candidates I'd like to introduce. First off, I have Joan Isaac from Coquitlam, Burke Mountain. Next, Mayran Zaram from Port Coquitlam, and Will Davis from Coquitlam, Millardville. Thank you. Families are the heart of our community here in the Tri-Cities, but many have been dramatically impacted by the pandemic. People have lost their jobs. Small businesses have been led down to shutting down their doors. BC Liberals recognize this, and we recognize it's time for bold action. That's why Monday's announcement that the BC Liberals are committing to eliminating the PST for a full year is welcome news from many families and small businesses in Port Moody and Coquitlam that are fighting to make a comeback. We need a government that is serious on restoring confidence and rebuilding BC. And that's why I'm so proud and honored to introduce the BC Liberal leader and next Premier of British Columbia, Andrew Wilkinson. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks, James, and it's great to be here with Moran, Will, Joan, and James in the Tri-Cities in front of this lovely doggy store that we're going to be visiting shortly. Today is Small Business Tax Collection Day, September 30th, when over $6 billion in deferred taxes have to be paid by small businesses like this one. It's going to be a big challenge, and in the current circumstances, we're going to see a lot of stressed small businesses that may decide they simply can't pay the bill. That means it could be the beginning of the end. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, to keep small business alive, to keep our economy thriving, we have announced, of course, 2 days ago, that these kinds of small businesses will not have to pay PST, provincial sales tax, for a full year, and then have a second year of 3% sales tax. And let's remember, it's not just the customers who come to the door who pay the sales tax on the dog food. It's the people who run these businesses who have to pay provincial sales tax on all the inputs they provide, whether it's the vehicles they use, whether it's the improvements to their facilities to get them open and running. Provincial sales tax is a huge cost for a small business. And yesterday in Comox Courtenay and in Campbell River, we heard repeatedly from small businesses that this will be a huge boost to their bottom line, give them a sense of hope, give them optimism, and allow them to keep operating. We also heard from the hospitality sector that taking provincial sales tax off alcohol will be a major boost to their ability to maintain their business, keep customers coming in the door, and keep that quality of life going throughout British Columbia. So taking small business to the point where it can survive is the main purpose for us taking a provincial sales tax down to zero for a year. It also gives everybody in British Columbia an immediate tax break that they can see right away, giving an average family $1,700 of tax relief in the first year. So with that, I think we'll move to taking questions.
Great, thank you. So we will start with Tanya Fletcher from CBC. Go ahead, Tanya.
Hello, Tanya.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, Andrew, about the death of a First Nations youth in a BC group home. Sparking calls for an investigation. He was 17 years old. He was found dead in his bedroom closet in Abbotsford 4 days after going missing. So we're asking, what would your government do to better protect First Nations youth in government care?
Well, the care of youth by government is a critically important function. I have a sister who's actually in a group home setting in Alberta and has been for the last 40 years. I know what that's about. When it's an Aboriginal situation dealing with an Indigenous youth, that requires even more thoughtful care and attention. There are a disproportionate number of Indigenous youth in our child care system, and that's something that we as a society must continue to make our best efforts to improve. It goes back to the entire lineage of the residential school system and the current state of challenges that our Indigenous communities face. So it's a core function of government to make sure that Indigenous youth are looking at a world of opportunity. Higher education is critically important for Indigenous youth to get them into the workforce and leading a life of prosperity and hopeful anticipation of the future. So this is obviously a tragedy, needs to be investigated in the particular case, and it's difficult to comment on the case not knowing any more facts. But let's be clear, getting our Indigenous youth fully involved in the economy and reaching their maximum potential is a core function of government.
Do you have a follow-up, Tanya?
Yes, please. Just on another topic, talking about transit. Today, BC mayors are collectively calling for more stable funding for badly needed transit projects. Would your government commit to that? If not, what is your plan and what details could you provide addressing their request?
I'm a big fan of transit. I used transit for decades going back and forth to work, and it's a great system we have in Metro Vancouver, and BC Transit provides very good service all around British Columbia. We'll be talking more about transit in the days to come and how it needs to be supported, particularly through the COVID pandemic when we've seen ridership drop by 70% and more. I just heard yesterday that the major transit lines here in Metro Vancouver are still operating at about 30% capacity. That means there's major stress on the transit system. We have to get the system through the pandemic and improve it as time goes by so that we can have the kind of life you find here in Port Moody, where people can work downtown, they can work farther out in Douglas College in Coquitlam, they can get to Surrey in a matter of minutes. That's the future of the Lower Mainland, and we have to make sure it's supported.
Great, thanks. The next question will go to Brishti Basu from Victoria Buzz. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Wilkinson. Thanks for taking my question. With regards to strategies or ways to manage the opioid crisis in BC, would the BC Liberals, if elected, continue the Safe Supply program through the distribution of prescription drugs by physicians and nurses?
Well, I've been saying for some time now that my medical experience teaches me that there are some people in our society who are going to require continued supply of clean, safe drugs probably for the rest of their lives. But that should not be our primary approach to drug addiction. We've got to provide a pathway to get people off drugs. We've got to provide prevention tools. We've got to provide the ways for people to lead a meaningful life without being dependent on drugs. That's got to be our goal as a society. And some people, unfortunately, will require lifelong supplies of clean, safe drugs, but they will be a small number.
Do you have a follow-up, Brishti?
Yes, and in terms of how to treat patients with complex mental health care needs, are there any plans to open or reopen any facilities to provide wraparound support?
Well, what we see right now under the NDP is a total failure in terms of dealing with mental health and addictions and housing. One of the NDP's cabinet ministers said herself today that it's simply not good enough to scoop people off the streets, drop them in a hotel, and expect success. That's the NDP's own statement about their failed housing program as their approach to dealing with mental health and addictions. These are complex disorders. We need to figure out the causes for individuals, treat them as human beings, not as a gaggle of people who are somehow all going to have the same answer. We've got to treat the causes and prevent the harm. And as I say, that's the appropriate approach to dealing with mental health and addictions and dealing with homelessness, is treat the causes and prevent the harm.
Great, thanks. We'll go to our next question. It's Binder Sajan from CTV. Go ahead, Binder.
Hi, Andrew. I'm just wondering, do you have concerns that up to, 500,000 voters who request a vote by mail package are going to get a blank one? What's your understanding of how to fill it out properly? And are you confident that voters will do it correctly without a list of candidates?
Well, one of the members of my household got the blank mail-in ballot about 4 days ago, and that's a blank form, and you have to fill in to show the intention of who you want to vote for, whether it's Andrew Wilkinson or BC Liberals. That has to be shown on the form. There will be some confusion about this, but Elections BC has, I think, appropriately decided to get the forms out in circulation as soon as possible. And on the guide form that they say that later versions of the ballot will come out with a list of candidates. But they're doing their level best in very difficult circumstances, and we expect an orderly postal vote here in British Columbia because Elections BC is very well run.
You have a follow-up, Binder?
I do. And I'm just wondering, the NDP leader John Horgan just announced a new long-term care home plan, saying that they're going to commit to building single-room long-term care homes, upping the wages. And he took aim at the previous Liberal government for cuts. And he says, some of the issues that we saw during this pandemic can be traced back to Liberal government policies. Do you have a plan for long-term care homes in your platform?
Let's make a few points here. The NDP blame game is getting tired for everybody. We're all looking for solutions. We're all looking to get through this pandemic and lead a better life afterwards. When the NDP announced a $1 jillion program with 100,000 this and that, it has no credibility. Their housing program was supposed to produce 114,000 housing units. It's produced 2,963 temporary units. At this rate, we'll be waiting for the NDP housing program for 125 years. So when the NDP come out with a grand plan, we say what seniors say to us. We need solutions and remedies now. We need to work on a seniors program that's going to bear fruit immediately, just like we need a program in that regard for so many things in this province where the NDP's grand schemes have really amounted to nothing, whether it's in childcare, whether it's in homelessness, whether it's in mental health and addictions, whether it's in housing. We see one failed NDP program after another. People expect better, and we're going to deliver better. We'll have more to say about seniors programs in the next week.
Great, thank you. Next question will go to Richard Sussman from Global News. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, Andrew. What has your candidate, Gary Finn, told you about his involvement in and knowledge of a group chat requesting information from voters, including social insurance numbers and driver license numbers?
Well, I first heard about this about half an hour ago, and I understand it's been reported to Elections BC. And of course, as this mail-in ballot phenomenon gets the attention of the public and the voters, there's going to be some confusion. But we have to be clear that it's the obligation of candidates to follow the law, and we expect that of them. And as this unfolds, we'll see if Elections BC has a position that we will, of course, respect.
Do you have a follow-up, Richard?
Do you believe that Gary Finn has followed the law? Are you concerned that he has broken the law? And I'm disappointed to know that you weren't watching Global News last night when we had this story on.
Well, I was trying to get back from Comox Courtney, and it's hard to watch your news on the airplane, Richard. But to the point, I just heard about this half an hour ago. I don't want to speculate as to what happened, but obviously it's been reported to Elections BC. They will make their determinations, and we will, of course, respect them. And we do hope for a very quick response from Elections BC under the circumstances. There is a lot of confusion out in the public about the mail-in ballot, and Elections BC is doing its best, and we will hope to have more clarity in the days to come.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. We have time for two more questions. Next question will go to Rob Shaw from Vancouver Sun. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, Andrew. I just wanted to go back to the seniors issue. John Horgan said that he is going to make permanent the wage top-up for long-term care workers so that they don't have to work in more than one facility, which is a rule right now in the pandemic to prevent against infection spread. What do you think of that permanent top-up and the permanent rule that going forward you don't have to work in more than one facility at a time?
Well, I think we all know that in the long-term care space, there are some people who choose to work part-time and in multiple facilities, and that has proven to be a problem during the pandemic because of the risk of carrying the virus back and forth between different facilities. So the medical health officer, Dr. Bonner Henry, very wisely 6 months ago said that it was going to come to a stop and people would have a single workplace. That needs to be sorted out in terms of the manageability of the lives of those workers, and there will have to be adjustments made, and there will clearly have to be adjustments in how that workforce conduct itself in terms of having more than one employer, and also in how much they're compensated to make sure that it's a workable situation for them as long-term care workers. We need those workers. We need those people to be taking care of our seniors. They need to be properly compensated so that they can do the job safely working in a single facility.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
Yes, thanks. And also on seniors care, John Horgan was saying he's going to invest in building more public facilities, but when asked about kind of his future vision for that, he said there'll be a mix of private and public. Do you have a similar kind of vision for what you think seniors care would look like under a Liberal government? Is it an investment in public facilities or a sort of continuation of the private sector leading these facilities with the health authorities and in partnership, or what does it look like under your vision?
My mother lived in assisted living for about 15 years and then transferred to a more active care environment and then eventually died in a seniors dementia care facility. I know what that feels like, and I know what it looks like. And what you do not want to do is disrupt seniors who are in a very established, satisfying environment where they have friends, they have familiar staff people. And so to come along and say that's going to be disrupted because of an ideological agenda is just plain wrong. So the second part of that is when we hear about NDP visions, we think of all kinds of good visions they've had, like 114,000 housing units that are nowhere to be seen, like $10 a day daycare that is a pilot program and that was just a slogan. So I'm very skeptical of NDP visions because they usually turn out to be mirages.
Great, thanks. We have time for one more question today, and that will go to Rob Buffum from CTV News, Vancouver Island. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, hi, good morning. Thanks for your time. I have a couple of questions related to the tourism industry. As we all know, it's been hit extremely hard by the pandemic, and as we get into the fall and winter months, all over the province, places like Victoria, there's going to be businesses just hanging on. I'm wondering if your government's elected, what would you do to try and help the tourism sector?
You know, I heard from a woman who is the chair of the BC Bear Viewing Association back in May. She said they have zero revenue this year. They had to return all the deposits to those tourists coming from Germany and Japan and Brazil to see bears in British Columbia. So they're in a dire situation, having fixed costs and zero revenue. And when we heard from the Tourism Industry Association of BC that they were looking for $600 million as bridge financing to get them through the winter to be able to operate and survive for next summer's tourists, that really struck a chord. We've got hundreds of thousands of people in this province who depend on the tourism industry for their well-being. There has been a bit of a recovery in the Okanagan this summer as people took staycations, but certainly when you go through the streets of Victoria, the hotels are empty. The souvenir shops are going broke. We are in a bad place in the tourism industry, and they need to have hope. They need to have support. And we'll be talking about that more in the days to come, because sadly what we saw from John Horgan was they delayed any possible opportunity until 3 days before calling an election, and instead of getting $600 million in support, the tourism industry got a consultation process to be embarked upon after the election. That's just cruel. That's just so dismissive, so cold-blooded, because these people are looking forward to a Christmas where they might be declaring bankruptcy thanks to the NDP.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
I do. So I take it from your response that some specific details from your party in terms of what you would do to help these businesses will be coming later with your platform. But I'm wondering if there's anything specific you can tell me, perhaps even related to, say, the other day when you announced the PST cuts, I believe you'd referenced that, that was going to have a benefit to tourism businesses as well. Can you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, the PST cut is obviously helpful to tourism businesses because it reduces the cost of the things they have to put together to run the programs, whether it's a speedboat or finishings for a lodge or any of the other things that they need to do to be ready for a tourist season. The costs go down. But what that doesn't do is help them on the revenue side and help them with their bankers. They need to borrow money to operate every summer. They need to hire staff. They need to be able to tell staff when they're hiring people in January or February, there will be some employment for you in April, May, June at the peak of the tourist season. So this is the kind of reassurance that we're hoping to offer the tourism industry so that they can go into 2021 with some confidence that they have a future. Because an awful lot of them have just been left high and dry by the NDP and left to starve on the beach. That's just so wrong. In beautiful British Columbia, which has so much to offer to tourists and to the tourism industry, suddenly the NDP have just abandoned them. That's fundamentally wrong in this province.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have for today, and we'll end our question period now. Thank you.
The dogs are getting excited, so we better go inside. Oh, we're going to let the Weimaraner go in. That's great.